Hello and welcome to Introduction to Teaching Business at Level 2. My name's Charlotte Raworth and I'm going to be delivering today's training session. In today's training, we're going to understand the main features of the International Level 2 qualification, focusing on business. We're going to look at how to plan a successful BTEC program, how to write and deliver engaging assessments, and understand how to quality assure the qualification. Let's first look at successful BTEC delivery. First, we need to look at the basics and look at the key differences between BTECs and other academic curriculum. It's first of all important to note that all BTEC qualifications are modular and consist of units. The amount of units that you must complete depend on the size of qualification that you have chosen to deliver. All of those BTEC qualifications consist of a number of mandatory units, so those that must be completed, plus a range of optional units. And again, this depends on the size of qualification you have chosen to deliver and the amount of guided learning hours that's involved with that size. All of the BTEC units are assessed separately over the duration of the time that the learners are on programme with you. At the end of the qualification, unit grades are combined to create an overall qualification grade for your learners. Let's have a look at an overview of the BTEC teaching assessment and quality assurance. So every BTEC has a specification, and within the specification, this outlines what the learners need to know and be able to do. Learners are assessed in two ways on the International Level 2 in business, and that's either using a Pearson set assignment or an authorised assignment brief, which can be adapted by you, the centre. These are all 100% internally assessed by you, regardless of the type of assessment taking place. You'll do this by using the specification and finding the learning outcomes and the assessment criteria within that specification to make your judgments against. Once the work has been assessed by you, then a sample is then internally verified by somebody else in your centre to check that the standards are being met. Pearson will engage with you at least once a year to standards verify the work to confirm that the standards are being met, and this is the external scrutiny of your programme. Providing that there are no compliance issues, you, the centre, can then claim your certification for the learners that have successfully completed the programme once they have completed all of the units needed for the size of qualification you have chosen. You can see here how the Level 2 qualification looks against the equivalencies of other similar standard of qualification. So the smallest size of qualification would be the award, and that's the equivalent of one international GCSE with 120 guided learning hours. The largest Level 2 qualification is the diploma, which is the equivalent of 4 international GCSEs with 480 guided learning hours. And you can see there how those guided learning hours are made up of those mandatory and optional units. You can also see from this slide the progression routes onto the Level 3 programmes. So let's talk about the specification in a bit more detail. The specification should be the document that you use on a daily basis. It provides really vital information about the structure of the qualification, how you assess each of those units, how to make the grading decisions, and how to complete internal verification. Within the specification, you'll find information about the structure. So guidance on how many learning hours are needed for the size of qualification, how many units make up that size of qualification, and there's further information and guidance on the content that needs to be taught to the learners and the assessment methods for each of the units. Once you've decided on the size of qualification you are delivering and which optional units you have chosen, you then need to make the decision on how you are going to structure your BTEC in your centre. You may decide to deliver some of the units in a more compressed way over a short period of time, whereas other units you might decide to deliver over an extended period of time. The choice is entirely up to you, as long as you are delivering the correct amount of units needed for your size of qualification over the duration that the learners are on programme with you. When you're planning how your units are going to be delivered, you also need to think about in what order they are going to be delivered. They do not need to be delivered in numerical order as they're found within the specification. You can deliver the units in whatever order you think is the best fit for your learners. You also need to think about your standards verification and your internal verification, and that needs to be considered over the duration of the time that your learners are on programme. Further information that you can find within your specification is that you can find the learning aims that are attached to each of the units. And the learning aims are split into multiples, so you may have learning aim A, B, C, and D, for example. Within the specification, you will see the content, and this is the information that should be delivered to your learners. There is no specification around how you deliver the content, but it is expected that 100% of the content will be delivered to your learners in whatever way you see is a best fit for your level of learners. So that might take place in work experience, guest visits, live case studies, homework activities, whatever you think is best. You'll also see the assessment criteria that is marked at pass, merit, and distinction, and they are attached to the relevant learning aims. There's also information how to grade the learner's work once they have completed, and there's some essential information around assignments and the assessment decisions. Within the specification, you'll also find some information around internal assessments and the administrative arrangements of delivering that unit. So the structure of the BTEC unit is entirely up to you of how you deliver it, obviously within the realms of delivering the correct amount of units for your size of qualification. Further information can be found within the specification around the resource requirements for each of the units, links to other units, and employer involvement. Let's now have a look at the units with Pearson set assessments. Each of these assessments is set by Pearson, and that's to maintain standardization across the world. There'll be 2 available for each of these units for each year per unit. Each Pearson set assessment has guidance for exam conditions, timings, and supervision, but they are not mandatory. They can be delivered however is best for you and your learners in your centre. Learners must complete the authorised Pearson set assignments for units 1, 2, 3, and 4, depending on the size of your qualification, but you do not write the assignment briefs for these units. That has been done for you. Pearson set assignments are subject to mandatory standards verification for at least 1 unit per year, and that's to make sure that you have all of the guidance and help in this relatively new method of assessment. Internal verification of the Pearson set assignment briefs is not necessary because they have already been written by Pearson and you are making no changes to these assessments. However, internal verification of the assessment decisions is necessary. As mentioned, there are 2 Pearson set assignments per unit for each 1-year period, and a resit is allowed. The Pearson set assignments can be completed at any time of the year during the time that the learners are on programme, but some Pearson set assignments are designed to be taken later on. Using one of the Pearson set assessments for your subject area, consider the following. What units are mandatory for my size of qualification? Which order of units should I deliver and when? And more importantly, why you think that that is best? When should I plan for the Pearson set assessments to be completed? and why do you think that that is best? And how are you going to prepare your learners for this type of assessment? Please press pause to complete this activity and press play once completed. Let's now look at creating engaging sessions. Delivery needs to reflect the learning aims and the type of content being delivered. There are some teaching resources available via the website that include delivery plans and schemes of work, which will help you to schedule a lesson, and a delivery guide to help structure a unit. It's important when looking at your units to identify where key mandatory content can be found within the unit. And this might be content towards the method of assessment that's taking place. For example, if a presentation is part of the assessment method, you may need to practice that alongside your teaching and learning. You need to structure the delivery to help the learners develop their skills, which includes combining initial knowledge delivery with initial skills delivery, and then increase complexity throughout the delivery. Be aware of the assessment that the learners need to complete and practice that alongside the teaching and learning. Always building informative assessments that combine both the knowledge and the skills elements. As the BTEC qualification is a vocational qualification, we need to reflect what's going on in the world of business. And at all times, really be aware of the fact that we are reflecting the industry so that we can engage and motivate our learners throughout their program. So wherever possible, can you build external links? Can you use live client briefs or case studies? Can you include work experience or visits? Can you invite guest speakers into your centre, but at all times making sure that the learning is active? We also need to make sure that the learners are given every opportunity to access all of the possible grading criteria within a task. And in order to do that, they need to be able to understand the command verb and the requirements within the learning aim. So does the criteria say that they need to explain, analyse, compare, etc.? And if so, do they know what that verb means and what the requirements are in response to it? The learners need to understand the evidence that they need to provide for a task. So is that a presentation, and what do they need to submit? Is it a professional report, and what does that look like? They need to have the opportunity to meet all of the grading criteria within a learning aim. Using a unit from your specification, consider the following. How can you reflect the industry and promote vocational learning in your lessons? What potential external links could you build? What types of evidence would you ask your learners to produce? Please press pause to complete this activity and press play once you've completed. Let's now look at the authorised assignment briefs. So for the first year of delivery, all of our centres must use the authorised assignment briefs for internal assessments. These are the assignment briefs that have been prepared by BTEC subject experts that can be used to assess effectively Level 2 units. Often the authorised assignment briefs still require the centre to choose a business or an area of business as the focus of the assessment tasks, amend the evidence requirements, or adapt the resources. But please remember, this is not for the Pearson set assignments. Using an authorised assignment brief for your subject area, consider the following. Is the scenario or task appropriate for your centre and your learners? And if not, what changes could you make? Will the evidence being asked get the best from your learners, or are there alternatives you could use? Please press pause to complete this activity and press play once completed. All of the BTEC units have some internal assessment rules as guidance for resits and resubmissions. The lead internal verifier or program manager may grant the learner an opportunity to resubmit assessment evidence for an assignment with all of the grades still available. In this circumstance, they'll be given 15 working days of the learner receiving their assessment decisions to make those amendments. But that can only happen if the learner has submitted their assessment evidence by the deadline date, the work is authenticated as original by the learner and by the assessor, and that the assessor judges that the learner can independently improve their assessment evidence. Once a learner has embarked on a resubmission, no further teaching or training or coaching can take place by the teacher or the assessor of that unit. Let's now look at the internal verification of those assessment decisions. Now, Pearson's role is to check that the learners receive the grades that they have earned over the period of time that they have been on programme. And during that time, we ask you to do some jobs that will help. Now, the basics of internal verification is that it's a centre-based quality assurance system that ensures that the assignment briefs, which are the assessment tools, are fit for purpose and that the assessment decisions are accurate. Internal verification needs to be taken by subject specialists in your centre. It involves the assessor and the internal verifier, but not the learners. And it supports the assessor in terms of compliance with the qualification, but also continuous improvement. But it's not a tick box exercise. Some of the roles and responsibilities around internal quality assurance are first of all, the assessor, or sometimes known as the teacher or tutor. They're responsible for teaching the specification and delivering the content from within the specification. They're also responsible for generating the assignment briefs, whether that be a Pearson set assignment or an authorised assignment brief. They're responsible for accurately assessing the learner's assessment evidence using the specification and the relevant grading criteria to make those decisions. And they're also responsible for generating and recording accurate learner feedback and the achievement. The internal verifier is responsible for checking that the assignment briefs are fit for purpose. They're also responsible for checking that the assessor has accurately assessed the learner's assessment evidence, and that's done by sampling. The internal verifier is also responsible for generating and recording their findings, providing feedback to the assessor, and ensuring that any remedial actions are carried out. The lead internal verifier or program manager is responsible for the standardization of the assessors and the internal verifiers so that the whole team knows how to interpret the assessment requirements in a unit specification. Can the team write a fit for purpose assignment brief or make an amendments to the authorized assignment briefs? Can they accurately assess learner assessment evidence? And can the team complete the necessary auditable forms? The lead internal verifier or program manager is responsible for overseeing the quality assurance of the assessment for the program, and they may put in meetings throughout the academic year to practice some of these skills. Internal verification needs to be rigorous in its approach. It needs to conform to a centre-wide process. So if you have other subject areas being delivered in your centre, you need to be completing internal verification to a similar standard. Internal verification needs to be systematically planned and managed by your centre. It needs to be planned in advance so that you have the adequate amount of time to complete the duties. Needs to be well administered and all paperwork needs to be completed and signed. Internal verification needs to be carried out in a timely manner. All assignment briefs must be internally verified prior to them being handed out to the learners, and a sample of the assessment decisions must be internally verified before the final grade can be given to the learners. The whole system needs to be monitored, and that might take place by the quality nominee or the program manager. It should inform continuous improvement. It should also be supportive and non-threatening, but it does need to be taken seriously, otherwise it does not fulfill its function. You can see from the visual representation of the document here the paperwork that needs to be completed for the internal verification of the assignment brief. The checks that need to be made are: does the assignment brief have accurate unit and program details on it? Does it have clear deadlines for assessment, so both the issue and submission dates? Does it include a suitable vocational scenario? Does it accurately indicate the assessment criteria being targeted by the task? Will it offer a full opportunity for the learners to generate appropriate and sufficient evidence? Does it clearly state the form of evidence required? And does it have a really clear presentation format? If you're using an authorized assignment brief, a lot of these checks have already been done for you. But the more changes and amendments you make to the internal assessments, the more checks you are going to have to complete. Stage 2 of the internal verification is at assessment decision stage. And this is where the internal verifier internally verifies a sample of the assessment decisions for each assignment that is issued to each cohort. And this is to make sure that the assessor's decisions are accurate when judged against the assessment requirements. Are the assessor's decisions consistent when judged against the assessment requirements? Has summative feedback been provided from the assessor that justifies why criteria has or has not been awarded? Have the assessment rules been followed for submissions and resubmissions? And is there no evidence of collusion or plagiarism in the learner's assessment evidence? Now, when you are making your sample choices for each of the units completed, you need to consider, as a minimum, whether the program is new or established. If it's a new program, the risk of getting things wrong is higher, and therefore your sample size also needs to be higher. You need to consider whether the assessor is new to BTEC or the unit. If the assessor is new, then the risk of getting things wrong is higher, and therefore the sample size also needs to be higher. Consider the size of the cohort. If it's a particularly large group of learners, the sample size needs to reflect that. You need to sample across the profile of the grades awarded. So look at if the assessor has completed assessments at pass, merit, or distinction, and make sure that you have seen a sample of each of those grades. Look at the forms of evidence that have been generated. Is there a form of evidence which is more poses more of a risk, and therefore if it does, you need to sample and scrutinize more greatly? Have there been any known issues over time? For example, have there been any staff changes? Or have you had any learner complaints regarding grading? Or have you had any Pearson Standards verifier feedback? And if you have, that would mean that you would have to alter your sample size in accordance. Other factors may include if you have multiple assessors on one unit, or the location of the students. If they are in multiple locations, you must standardize across those locations. Further support and resources are available to you. So you do have a subject advisor, and his details can be found on the main landing page within the Pearson website. There are some blended learning digital ebooks available that work alongside each of the units. There are textbooks, and there is also the Learning Hub, which includes the Progress platform. Here is just a quick look at what some of those ebooks look like. You can see from the first visual that there is a teacher dashboard, and this helps you to review whether the students have accessed the material, and you can access the content to direct and guide the students' usage. The students can also access the ebooks via mobile and desktop apps. There's also a dashboard of resources that are available to the teachers, and there's also activities that help the learners to build their knowledge and skills, but also helps to create some blended learning alongside your classroom teaching. I hope you've enjoyed today's training. Thank you very much.